being a pompous ass before we came on air, and Mark Ongst.
Well, I mean, you are. I'm not. I mean, you are.
Eli Manuel.
Why would you draft a wide receiver, too?
Eli, you can cut this out.
You can leave it in, too.
Restart.
Kyler Murray has a fantastic arm. It's just the decision-making for him, for me. Michael Vick just made better decisions, I feel like, overall.
Makes sense. I said 1 or 2 inches, growing 1 or 2 inches, and you're like...
And he's still going...
I have leagues on too many apps. I don't know what to follow.
Welcome to another Thursday edition of the Dynasty Academy. I'm Michael Washington, a.k.a. Chewbacca77, for those out there listening that wondered who I am, and he is Mark Ongsty22.
11.
You're 22. 11. Yours, what is it, your email is 22? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Anyways.
22. 11 was taken.
Oh, okay. Ongsty11 on Sleeper. Mark, first and foremost, how you doing, man? How are your fantasy teams doing right now at this point?
Pretty meh across the board.
Pretty meh across the board.
2-2 in a lot of places.
I was looking at my teams. I had a really good week last week, but I do a thing every year. I don't know how you do it, but for me, every year I always have a thing where I want every single one of my teams to at least win one game.
Yes.
Like that I want every team. Since 2017, I have not had a team without a win anywhere. Right?
I think I did that already now this year.
Well, I eliminated three teams. There's one team that I don't think is going to get a win. That's in Return of the Empire. I don't think I'm going to get a W in that one. That team is so bad and so young that I don't believe for an instant I'm going to get a win in that league. So if you're listening and you're in Return of the Empire with me, you're welcome for your bye week. So this may be the first time on my 7-year streak here that comes to an end. So
I'm pretty sure all of my teams have now had a win. And what's really makes it even more meh is teams I want to lose aren't necessarily losing. Like, yeah. Prism, I think I'm 1-3. In Superflex, I'm like 2-2. Champions, I think I'm like 1-3, but like barely 1-3, almost like I think I was the highest scorer in Champions 2 weeks ago, and like
somehow,
yeah. And I'm trying to not win.
Try not to win, yeah. I think that we have. I don't know what happened to our diluted team. And I'm not really sure what happened to our Dynasty team either. Like, both those teams, I don't know. Diluted, last 2 years we've been in the playoff hunt, championship run, and this year we're off to, like, what are we, 1-3, and
I think
one of the worst teams in the league? That's crazy. I don't know what the hell happened.
But then we have a team who I mean, this week it changed. We're 4-0, but we dropped to, like, points against to, like, 4th. We were points for first and points against we were first.
Right, yeah, that was.
I think we're 4th now.
Yeah, that was in. I don't remember the name of that league for some reason.
Down in
Devi. Yeah, down in Devi. But yeah, so I got 2 teams left. Even those little redraft 25, the ESPN ones that I did that I don't care about, I have a win across the board in every single one of those.
You do free ESPN redraft leagues?
Oh yeah, I don't take them seriously.
Why?
Because I was bored and wanted to draft.
On ESPN though?
Well, yeah. I mean, I had it downloaded. I mean, I just went ahead and did it. Whatever. I also did a hockey one this year too because that's how bored I am. Like with drafting, I want to draft.
Do some bet ball.
I want to draft. Yeah, I know. I probably should. Anyways, well, I just wanted to do a little week 4 because the quarter of the season's pretty much gone. We're into week 5 now, so. Well, it's a little bit different now because it's not 16 games anymore; it's 17. But you know what I mean. It's like right around there, anyways.
I'll have to go through for next week and like tally up what my records are to see. But I am pretty sure I'm probably at least 60% of my leagues at 2-2.
60%. Okay. All right.
I feel that's what I feel like.
Well, before we get started on tonight's show, I want to give a shout out again to Sam over there, Shady Sports Network, for giving us a platform, giving us a chance to be able to reach out and get some new viewers and stuff. If you are in a league and you are listening to us right now tonight, our topic tonight is Mark is now, mind you, I haven't seen these players, but Mark is going to take two teams at certain positions or at the same position that are close in points so far through the first 4 weeks. And we are going to discuss whether or not we want to, I guess, keep them moving forward, or
who would you rather own?
okay,
So maybe you were looking to go make a trade, and these were the two wide receivers you're looking at.
Okay.
Which one would you be going after? Not that you wouldn't want. I tried to make it close in age, close in what we kind of think about those players in general. Like, I didn't try to make it real easy where it's like, oh yeah, it's definitely that guy. Like, I didn't pick Justin Jefferson and, let's say, Michael Wilson, because right now they're close in points, but we know who we all like. Like, I tried to make
Right.
it where legit, you could take either one, but which one is probably a little slightly more
Okay.
on
That's
your
fair.
radar.
That makes sense. Now, I haven't seen any of these players. I have no idea what these players are. Mark Quinton ahead. He actually brought this up last week. I couldn't make the show last week, so I'm sure he's probably been sitting on him for about a week now. Or
No, I waited
what of
because
it.
the points changed.
Oh, you waited?
So
Yeah, well, that's
yeah.
fair. Yeah, that's fair. So, also, if you're listening tonight and your viewers, like, drop it in your comments. Drop your teams. Drop anything along those lines. You got trade questions? By all means, we'll answer them on air when we get to them. Anything along those lines that you have, waiver wire pickups of sorts, or what you want to do with the future team, by all means, please do it. And we'll give you fair advice. Again, we're not going to screw you over because that's not what we do here. It's not in our blood to do that. So, with that being said, let's go with the first two players, Mark, that you have picked for this. I don't even know what to call this. I guess we have to come up with a segment. I'm going to come with little segment videos and stuff moving forward and whatnot. So,
Yeah,
but I have no idea what to call this show. But
you can call it this or that. Maybe
would you rather?
Would you rather?
That.
So that. Would you rather? Would you rather? I like
Would you
that.
rather?
Would you rather? All right. So
I guess would you rather?
I have two players from every position, so there's 8 total players. Tight end is included, so you can get over it
yeah,
now.
my favorite. Love it.
Yeah,
so
we'll start
I'm
with
over
quarterbacks.
it, but I'm not thrilled about it.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Quarterbacks. So I used stats from Champions Dynasty League for your reference. So if anybody out there's like, their points aren't like that in my league. All leagues are very different in scoring. I figured this was one of the more basic-ish of our leagues where we don't have anything too crazy, too skew scoring, anything too far. So, and it's PPR, so that's the way to go. So we got Joe Burrow and Brock Purdy. Currently, they are 1 point apart at 76.9 and 75.9. Right now, Purdy has 1,100 yards. Burrow's almost at 1,000. 7 pass TDs for Burrow, 5 for Purdy. 2 interceptions for Purdy, 1 for Burrow. And air yards, which I thought was interesting because I thought Burrow's would be more. It's actually Purdy with 822 to Burrow's 524. Completion percentage, 71% for Burrow and 69% for Purdy. So very similar stats so far this season for these two guys.
I think a lot of people mistake Purdy as being a guy who's just a game manager, because that's what that offense basically does for quarterbacks. But I saw the statistic last year, or his rookie year, when he ended up coming in and taking over, how much air yardage increased, or yards per pass increased under him. It was almost a 3.5 yard difference between any of the quarterbacks that they had at the time. Now, mind you, it was Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance, so it's not like it was like some kind of stellar competition that he did it with. However, that 3.5 yards is basically maintained throughout any of his starts. So they take the shots down the field with him. In this case, though, I'm gonna stick with Burrow, and
Okay.
I'm sticking with Burrow primarily because I think he is a difference maker. For Purdy, I'd be very curious to see what the splits are going to be without. Well, I mean, I guess they re-signed Ayuk too, but I guess without Christian McCaffrey, once we see a larger sample size, what the splits are going to be with his statistics and how much of that's him relying on McCaffrey. Because I don't think Jordan Mason is as active in the passing game. I don't think that he's caught as many or as much of a check down option. I feel like Kittle's numbers have improved though. So
6 receptions total
for Mason.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mason's not active at all in the passing game, where I know that we all know that McCaffrey is. So it does make a little bit of a difference there. I just don't think the sample size's big enough just yet for me to be able to be like, yeah, well, that's the reason why I'm worried about Purdy. Now for Burrow, I just think he's a difference maker. I think he has the potential to be a quarterback one at any given point in time in a season, and be around that top 2 or 3 at any time. I know the Bengals have struggled a little bit the last couple of years. Last year he got hurt, and this year it's kind of rough to start with. Hopefully Chase and Higgins can get this figured out, and we don't have to worry about hearing about this drama, because I think it's actually taken away from this team. I do expect Higgins maybe to walk, but I think Cincinnati will target wide receiver, maybe not to Higgins, capabilities next year, but maybe they'll target a wide receiver in free agency to bring in, or maybe they even draft a guy in the second round to kind of alleviate that a little bit, because Jermaine Burton has been like, you hear one thing here and then you hear another thing there, and it's quite off the rails. Like one time it's him not studying and Burrow telling him to be in the books, and now suddenly he's a pillar and like he's doing everything right, and they're really super impressed with him. So maybe Burton gets into that role, but Yoshi Voss has kind of stepped up, into that slot receiver role, which has been big for Burrow too, and I think that's what he needs. It's Chase and Higgins. Having them are great, but not having that safety net number 3, because let's face it, their tight ends suck. Yoshi Voss stepping in has been fantastic. So I still think I'm going to run with Burrow, and because we've seen what he's capable of doing moving forward. But Purdy is a very good option, and I think people kind of underestimate what he really does in that San Francisco offense, because everybody thinks it's the weapons around him.
Yeah, it's for sure. People think that and still think that at times. Does the Chase and Higgins drama doesn't worry you at all? That possibly neither one. I mean, are you assuming Chase will be tagged if not re-signed?
Chase isn't in a contract year. He's got one more year on his deal. That's the reason why this is crazy. Like, I don't understand why he's a year ahead of time.
I thought he was.
No, I'm pretty sure that he has a year left on his deal.
But even so you think they will get him re-signed?
I think that's the reason why they got the Higgins deal done now, and they're going to wait for Higgins to get off the books. And when Higgins gets off the books, it's going to free up more money. And with the cap going up next year, I think Chase is absolutely going to get his deal. And whether he deserves it or not, he will become the highest paid wide receiver in the league. So, I'm not concerned about it when it comes to Chase.
His 5th-year option, I think, is next year. I think you're right.
Yeah, they had to pick it up in the offseason. That's why I didn't understand this whole drama now. Like,
yeah,
dude, just go out and play. You have another year. It doesn't make any sense why you're causing issues for your team at this point in time. I think it will get done, and I think he will be a Cincinnati Bengal, because I don't believe they're going to let Higgins and Chase walk. I think they just want to get Higgins off the books first.
Yeah, so it's tough for me because Burrow got his contract. We know he's with Cincinnati. I do believe at this point I think they're going to try and keep one of them, Higgins or Chase, whichever one it ends up being. Injuries, though. I mean, Purdy's dealt with some things here and there, but Burrow, it's a lot of injuries. And I know injuries are freak things, but it's just like, is it the style of his play? Is it holding the ball too long? Is it the offensive line not being good enough? Is it the team? Like I I feel like sometimes Burrow is carried off of his Super Bowl run season and his college season. And I myself, I think I've at times kind of look past some of his deficiencies we've seen here in the NFL. It's I think it's a tough question because Purdy has been a very consistent player in his time on a good team, and I get it. The weapons around him, I totally understand. But you could say the same thing about Joe Burrow as he really elevated when Chase or Higgins is out. Has his game really made anybody now? I agree. Yoshivash has been the guy to step up, but is that because there just isn't anybody else? Isn't no other option? I think I would still lean Burrow, but it's starting to really get to the point where that Purdy train might pass if Burrow season and Purdy season continue kind of how they've been. Because Burrow has, I think, the higher upside, but his floor seems to be a lot lower compared to Purdy's safer options and not being as far off in ceiling anymore.
The only problem with these two and this question is the perception in the fantasy community, right? We're taking a look at the way that Purdy is playing and the numbers speak for themselves, but then you're always going to have the people that are like, well, it's Brock Purdy. He was the last pick in the draft. He's on a good team. It's the system. It's this, it's that. And he hasn't won a Super Bowl, right? Like he's been to the Super Bowl, he's been to an NFC Championship game, but hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. So unlike a guy like Tom Brady, who did it through the system early in his career, people are not going to look at the same for Brock Purdy because he hasn't won the Super Bowl yet. Forget all his other achievements because that apparently doesn't matter. I mean, why would it? Of course not. However, his numbers are very, very, very good, and they're lots more surprising when you break them down and look into it, especially from an analytical standpoint. If you're an analytics guy, you should be very happy getting Purdy in round 6 compared to Burrow in round 2 in a super flex league. So it's just, unfortunately, I just don't know if the perception will ever change. So the value is always going to lean on Purdy's side in this case.
Correct.
So
I don't know.
if we're looking at it from a standpoint of value, then I think I would rather have Purdy than Burrow.
I'm not really looking at it these ways. Just in your eyes,
but it's a nice little different angle to look at, right?
Oh,
because it goes back to why we're talking about these two. Like, if you had just asked a random person that's not listening to our explanation for this, Burrow or Purdy moving forward, 10 out of 10 is going to probably say Burrow, unless they're a 49ers fan and love Purdy, right? Like
8. Well, I'll go with 8 out of 10. We'll say Burrow. 8 out of 10 for sure.
I'll say 9.5. Maybe half a person is a little bit on the fence. I don't know.
But I mean, honestly, all of these are going to kind of be like that, especially the next one at the running back. There is a clear one I know people will think, but I think that's because people are overlooking the other running back I chose. And I chose those two strictly for that reason.
Yeah.
And their points are close this year, but I think the perception of one of them is the problem.
Yeah, it very well could be. So, but yeah, so as far as like looking at it from a certain standpoint when it comes to moving forward, I would say probably Burrow, but from a value standpoint, definitely Purdy. So has to be taken that has to be taken into consideration, especially when he's playing so well and his points are so close together. So, all right, this is an interesting one because running back, the position has changed so much in just the last 3 years alone. Especially with the way that teams are tackling it, the way that we're looking at it, how things are. So,
like, I did see something funny. It was the list of the top rushers in the NFL currently, and the comment was Derrick Henry, who is the top rusher after
Yep.
last week now in the NFL, proving why running backs are important. And then the number 2 running back in terms of yards right now is Jordan Mason, proving why running backs aren't important. And it's like, oh, literally, you took these 2 guys are the perfect dichotomy to say, yeah, we need running backs. No, guess we don't.
This is what I will say. I think running backs are extremely important in the sense of real life football. Because if you take a look at running backs, if you don't have a running game, if you don't have a running back capable of getting the tough yards or falling forward in certain situations, your play action and your RPO go out the window. And you're basically running a West Coast or spread offense with no run game, the shoot, run and shoot, whatever the hell it was, whatever it's called. And we've all seen those types of offenses fail, right? Because they're too one dimensional, right?
In the same sense, we see San Francisco just
In-
roll through running backs, and they all work.
In fantasy football world,
I'm
they're not
relevant.
They're not relevant at all because there's no way you can predict it. Derrick Henry in Baltimore at the first couple of weeks, yeah, he scored a touchdown every week, but first couple of weeks, you're looking at him going, yeah, this is garbage. And even I was like, Derrick Henry's going to get into this system, but this system does not fit what Derrick Henry does. I mentioned it, right? Like, Derrick Henry is not an RPO running back. He never has been. It's never been his thing. He's never worked out of the pistol and anywhere. I watched his friggin' high school highlights, and they ran a power I because, I mean, they could have just ran single back and it would have been fine.
They could have just hiked the ball because he would have just ran everybody over.
But he ran basically a pro-style offense his entire life. So I was like a little bit weary. I knew that he would work his way in, but watch what's going to happen. He may very well be boom or bust down the stretch.
He's going to 100% be. 100%
he's going to be boom or bust. Like, it's not going to be a reliable situation like it has been in the past. But
last year.
But Jordan Mason is the epitome, like the Elijah Mitchells of the world. Like, that system just works and pumps out running backs. So it's just from a fantasy standpoint, you don't want to deal with the mess, right? I think leagues are going to start narrowing running backs from 2 to 1. It's what's going to happen, and you're going to start finding other ways to get bonuses in for running backs to keep them somewhat relevant, like tight ends, like they did with tight ends. Because let's face it, at this point in time, that's basically what's happening to the running back position. It's turning into the new tight end.
Yeah, so it's getting to that point. It's just running backs at least a little bit better.
And there's a lot of, and I honestly believe that the running back by committee is the best thing to happen to football. It's just not the best thing to happen to fantasy football.
Correct. Yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of talented running backs out there, but if you are not pulling a Detroit Lions type of offense, you're basically playing Russian roulette with the position. So
if you aren't good enough to be the pass catching running back and at least get carries to go with it, like Bijan Robinson, Algier still gets his run and does well when out there, but Bijan is good enough to do both very well.
Yes.
But then you have guys like Derrick Henry. Now, he's just really good, but if it wasn't for how good he was, he wouldn't be as fantasy relevant because he doesn't get the catching prowess that he. That's what makes Algier not good enough is he doesn't get the passing to go with it. Really, he just gets mainly, 8 to 10 rushes. Maybe he has 60 yards, but that's all you're going to see from him. Maybe, hopefully, a touchdown, and that's rare on top of it. All right, running backs. We have Jahmyr Gibbs at 75.5 points and James Cook at 74.5 points. Gibbs is at 285 rush yards, Cook at 227. Rushing TDs, they both each have 3. Receiving TDs, they both each have 1. 11 receptions for Gibbs on 13 targets and 9 receptions on 10 targets for Cooks. So again, very similar points. I think style similar. I know who the fantasy community will 100% go for, but I think that's because Cooks gets overlooked a lot because He wasn't the high, number 8, 7, whatever, 12 first-round pick. His offense doesn't seem high-powered in people's eyes, but I think he's proven for a couple of years now that he can be viable. Who would you rather have?
So this is an interesting one because I think this is actually closer in the community's perspective, especially this year, than it was last year, and I think it's also closer than the Burrow and Purdy discussion, primarily because James Cook is the only guy in Buffalo. Like
Yeah.
Ty Johnson has gotten some play, but I mean it's basically a spot thing, right? Like he comes into to relieve Cook, but Cook is also a very good pass catching a running back. We talked about this in the primarily a lot on this show, especially when it comes to James Cook, because I think our show, or at least with you and me, we've always been higher on Cook than most other people. So I completely understand this one. I'm still taking Gibbs because he has more of a home run threat than Cook does. I know the big plays, like the big splash plays, don't have to happen as often, right? Like everybody talks about, like, oh well, this guy's a home run threat, or this guy has top end speed. In real life football, a running back making those big splash plays are not often. They're not as often as people think they are, because people remember the 99-yard rush that Derrick Henry had, right? But they don't realize that a majority of his rushes are little 5-6 yard little bangers, right? Like they
3,
ignore
4 most of the time.
it,
Yeah.
right? They ignore it because he had that 99-yard splash play, so they're like, "Oh, he's dynamic," and that's what Gibbs is. Gibbs, however, has proven on regular basis that he has um, the better ability to be able to get the yards per carry higher than Cook. Now, that is a testament to his offensive line, though. Detroit has probably the best offensive line in football. And I think that this offense is also a little more balanced and doesn't rely on Gibbs as much as Buffalo's relies on Josh Allen. If Josh Allen is off, like we saw last week, James Cook doesn't have the games that we need on a more consistent basis. If Detroit is having an off game, or Jared Goff is having an off game and he's not going 18 for 18, they can still use Gibbs and Montgomery to still get decent fantasy production that you need from that standpoint. We saw it in week 1 with Amon-Ra St. Brown had 2 catches for 19 yards. Gibbs still had 2 touchdowns in that game, or a touchdown in that game, and put up a good fantasy game. So I just think that right now, with them being in their offenses, Gibbs is a guy that I would want. However, I think Cook now needs to be in the discussion of being the top or near the top of the tier 2 running backs with the ability to get into the bottom of tier 1. I think that conversation needs to be had.
I agree. What's tough for me with Cooks right now is he doesn't have more rushing attempts than Gibbs does, and Gibbs is sharing a backfield. So part of that is obviously the offense in Buffalo not running the ball enough, and that's been, I think, a lot of their downfall for a couple of years now, that they don't run the ball enough at times. Another thing that it seems like is finally happening is the Detroit offense is starting to go more and more through Gibbs than it is Montgomery these last few weeks. And I think that's the trend we'll probably continue to see going forward. It's funny because right now, David Montgomery is only 2 points ahead of both of these guys currently, but I think that's off big early season rushing games. But in these last 2 weeks, it definitely seems like that Detroit offense is starting to shift to Gibbs being the main guy and Montgomery being the backup player, where it was the opposite before. There are going to still be games when Montgomery is the guy because that's just how the game flow goes. But in that sense, that's why I'm taking Gibbs, because that seems to be the way that rotation is going. And it's hard to trust Buffalo in the running game. I still like James Cook. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. I'll take either one. We and you own Cook probably in every league almost across the board.
We own him
If
in a
we're
lot.
in it
That's
together,
for sure.
we probably own him. If we're not in it together, one of us probably owns them. And I think people need to start putting more respect on James Cook's name and understand he is a really good running back. And I think Buffalo needs to start trusting him more than they do, giving him more opportunities than they already are. I mean, he's the first game he had 19 carries, 71 yards. I know that's not a great yards per carry, but it's still a good game. And then 11 for 78. I mean, that was his big game, 7 yards per carry. That's not sustainable either.
Right.
But then Jacksonville only 11 for 39, but at least he had 4 catches for 48 yards. So
right,
game flow gave him that. But then 9 for 39 this past week, a good yards per carry. It's just they didn't throw the ball to him. They gave up on running the ball with him. I get they fell behind, but he's one of your best players.
Yeah.
Why are you not utilizing him more? So I'm going to just trust the offense in Detroit and go with Gibbs. That's really what it comes down to at this point for me.
Now, are you concerned if Ben Johnson takes a head coaching job next year?
Well, of course, because we don't really know what that offensive scheme will be. But in the same sense, Buffalo fires their offensive coordinators halfway through seasons, I feel like, every year.
That's true.
So I can't say that means I'm going to know who's going to be their offensive coordinator. I can't base it off of those things. I think Dan Campbell knows how his team is and is going to.
And I'm pretty sure Dan Campbell also already has a plan in place for when Ben Johnson does go.
You have to think so, because it's been talked about for so many years. You have to think they've already started that process. You have to hope so, at least.
And I will say that I was upset that Ben did not come to Washington in the offseason, but I understand his reasoning for it, and I'm still rooting for him. But at the same time, it may have been a blessing in disguise, because Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury have really good chemistry with this team. So, in Washington.
Cliff is working very well with Jaden Daniels.
The
side of Jaden Daniels I did not expect to see, especially this early.
And on top of that, I'm also liking him as a coordinator. I did not like him as a head coach, but as a coordinator, it's for sure up there. Nathan, this is a Dynasty Academy. It's a fantasy football show about fantasy football.
Fantasy football.
Dynasty leagues moving forward and whatnot. Not redraft, but we'll answer any questions.
them if you ask.
We will answer any questions if you have them.
But not talk about it on our own.
Yeah, we don't talk about redraft, but we will answer your questions if you have questions about redraft for sure. So, But yes, this is a fantasy football show. It's on the Shady Sports Network, so that's what we do here on Thursday nights.
But to go back to your question a little bit, it's too hard to know what you're going to have. And I mean, I think Tampa Bay is a perfect example. I never expected Canales to be hired as a head coach after one season with us. So you never know. So you can't base it on those things. When they happen, you have to readjust, but you got to live in the moment for those type of things.
Also, I'm loving the Baker Mayfield resurgence over there, by the way. So
he is on it this season. Hopefully it keeps it going.
Hopefully so. All right, let's move on from running back to wide receiver. This is an interesting one. This is one I'm kind of. Actually, can we do tight end first?
Sure, if you want to.
I don't want to close the show with tight end. It's so miserable. I don't want to close the show with tight end.
All right, tight ends. We're going to do Trey McBride, who is at 43.5 points, and Dalton Kincaid, another Buffalo Bill, at 43 points. Now, McBride did miss a week, so obviously that does skew his points a little bit, but I think these two are both so young and very close in general that I think it still works. So McBride is currently at 122 receiving yards with no touchdowns to Kincaid's 132 receiving yards and 1 touchdown, which is interesting that McBride is ahead of him in points. 14 receptions to 13 reception, 21 targets to 18. And that's about all you need to know about these tight ends.
This goes back to when we ranked tight ends in the offseason, and I had Trey McBride down because I talked about target share and how his was so voluminous last year that his numbers were going to be skewed heading into this season, and people were going to overrate him because of that factor. This is the same situation that's happening right now, and even happening with Dalton Kincaid in Buffalo. Last year, I feel like that his volume numbers went up when Stephon Diggs kind of checked out 3/4 of the way through the season or whatever the hell it was. However, the only thing that I will say with this situation is I think Arizona's cap space, believe it or not, even with that Kyler Murray contract, is actually in better shape than Buffalo's.
Yeah.
So moving forward, I think I would rather have Kincaid over McBride, primarily because I think that we're already seeing what the dip off is from McBride with Marvin Harrison Jr. there. If they add somebody else at that receiver position because they're not happy with the development of Michael Wilson, it could get really scary that McBride falls even further down that trek, right? Down that pecking order. And and another person that's not even being talked about is Trey Benson. He hasn't really seen the field that much this year because they don't need to work him in. It's fine. However, Trey Benson can catch the ball. He is a good safety net for quarterbacks if they need it. He caught some passes at Oregon. He caught some passes at Florida State. He can catch the ball. So I would be just proceed a little more cautious with McBride. However, this is probably closer to a coin flip than any of the other ones you've done, in my opinion, because they are both so young.
Would it surprise you that McBride's target share right now is 9, 6, and 6 in the 3 games? Those are his target numbers.
No, that wouldn't surprise me because because Michael Wilson hasn't really come on yet. It would surprise me in the set because I don't think Kincaid's has been that high.
So Kincaid has the extra game, so that's what pulls his. But it was 2, 4, 5, and this past week they threw 7. Now I think part of that is because of the game flow. They started throwing the ball a lot more, a lot earlier. But 2, 4, 5, and 7.
Right, which goes to show you again that is Kincaid doesn't need to be a primary target in that offense, but can be resourceful and needed or used when necessary. Whereas McBride, they're basically relying on him a little bit more because they don't have a receiver that they can believe in outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. in Arizona. Think about it. The first week, Harrison had one catch for 18 yards.
Something like that, yeah.
McBride had 9 targets. So like
I think only 3 catches it ended up being or something.
Yeah, but I mean just in general.
5 for 30.
Yeah,
it was not a good game, I think, for Arizona all around.
And I also think the trajectory of what Buffalo. I think Buffalo also. I like Brandon Beane as a GM. I don't really know much about Arizona's GM, but I think Marvin Harrison just kind of luck boxed into him. I don't think that was really a brilliant draft pick because I mean, I mean 3 quarterbacks went ahead of them, which were all 3 quarterback needy teams. So it was the only team that could have made a difference would have been Chicago keeping Justin Fields and drafting Harrison at 1. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I don't think they would have done that anyway. But
well, I know, but I'm just saying. Other than
Patriots,
that,
I could have seen taking them and just waiting on the quarterback if they wanted to.
They could have, yes. That'd probably be the only team that could have done it because they were going to be terrible anyways, and they just got worse with David Andrews on IR too. So, but yeah, I think I'm going to still slide with Kincaid a little bit. I think this offense is also a little bit more explosive than Arizona's offense, and I trust Josh Allen more than I trust Kyler Murray. So, coin flip, but it's 51-49, percentage-wise. I think I'm going to go with Kincaid.
Yeah, it's just been very odd this season with that offense. And I mean, I know Dawson Knox is still getting used, but they just, I don't know. It's been a very weird season for Buffalo. They've won looked great probably only really in one game. I mean, they should have probably lost Arizona in that first game. Arizona kind of gave that up in the second half. Game 2, I think, was, Cook's big game, had a great game. He kind of carried the offense. And then Jacksonville, I don't even think Buffalo looked at it. It's been a very they've been grinding it out, which is good to see for them because that's what you almost need in the playoffs. You need that team that's going to be able to win those dirty games. It's just very, very odd offense for them, I think, trying to figure out what they have, who they have, who's going to be what, and trying to go from there. But I think I ranked McBride ahead of Kincaid, or maybe they were. I mean, they're probably neck and neck. They're both.
Yeah,
young.
you had him. I think you only had him like one spot off. I think it was.
If they were probably 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, something like that. I would probably lean McBride solely based on the extra season still, and the fact that that offense doesn't have a ton. Not that Buffalo does, but I have to assume Buffalo's going to go out and get for sure a wide receiver next year. If they don't, it'd be really odd. Arizona could, but I think they're less of a chance than Buffalo is.
I think the
Buffalo
biggest
needs.
I think the biggest problem with next year is the free agency for wide receivers is not very good. But here's the problem with that though is both these guys just drafted wide receivers high. And do they double dip again and do it again, or do they wait till the third and hopefully get somebody? Because Khalil Shakir has looked nice for Buffalo. Arizona really hasn't had a second receiver look nice, so I guess I could see them double dipping. But does Buffalo really need to if Keon Coleman continues to develop? Like, it's just a matter of whether or not Keon Coleman can continue to develop, right? Like, that's the big question mark.
Well, and that also plays into because Coleman is probably more like a tight end-ish style player with his size.
Yeah.
So could those two where obviously Michael Wilson is obviously not he's a good size receiver, but he's not that big, not like Keon Coleman is. But I agree with you. It's one of those things where I don't think you can go wrong either way, and that's why I wanted to look at both of them. It's just it's an interesting to look at how we looked at probably especially Dalton Kincaid, not much around him. That offense, they got to go through him, and they don't technically right now.
I don't think we expected Khalil Shakir to step into the spot that he stepped into though either. Like, I don't think anybody really checked it because let's face it, right now that offense in the passing game runs through Shakir.
Yeah.
Like, and that's surprise. I think that surprises a lot of people.
And because I don't think he's that style of player a lot. I think
he's a good player, but I don't think he's but he's succeeding.
Sure, for now, it's one of those things. Can you do it consistently over time?
Well, of course. Obviously, small sample size, so
defenses start to figure you out. Will you be able to adjust as a receiver?
Right.
Can you? Right. So, all right, wide receiver. I think this one is going to be the most fun one. Because I think it's but I think it's two really, really good wide receivers in the NFL, young guys. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Marvin Harrison Jr. They are equal in points at this moment in time. Both have 72.9. Both had terrible game one. So we can't even say, one game is really the difference. Both had terrible game one.
I think Harrison's
currently.
Game 2, I think
so
Harrison's
was Amon-Ra's though.
Was it as good as his?
I don't know if it was
he actually had
as good, but he 11 for 119 just didn't have a touchdown for Amon-Ra in his game 2. But 27 receptions for Amon-Ra, only 15 for Marvin. 252 receiving yards for Amon-Ra, 243 for Marvin. Marvin has 4 touchdowns. Amon-Ra only has 2. 38 targets for Amon-Ra to Marvin's 28. The yards per reception is pretty staggering right now. Marvin is at 16 to Amon-Ra's 9. Not surprising, but I think Marvin's will come down. That game too, he had a couple deep passes. And then their catch percentage, and I don't think this is all that surprising, but Amon-Ra's at 71 to Marvin's only 53. So that might be the surprising part. And I think some of that is Kyler Murray though. But
yeah, I think some of that's Kyler Murray too.
Amon-Ra only 24 on his, maybe going to be 25, but this is his fourth season. To Marvin being 22 and in his first season. So a guy we've only seen 4 games from, but obviously touted as being a really, really good player. Amon-Ra has proven it a little more, but can he be the number 1 wide receiver that everybody thinks Marvin could be?
I think in the shorter term, so the next couple years, I still think I want Amon-Ra. I think long term, probably over the 2 to 3 year mark, I probably want Marvin Harrison. So I think that what I would do, or how I would tackle that question, is give you the answer of Amon-Ra, just because usually in Dynasty, as much as we want to look out to 4 or 5 years, we realistically have to look at 2 to 3. Like, that's the range that we have to look at. So I think in this window, I'm going to say Amon-Ra just because I would rather have him in 2 to 3. But if you ask me this question 2 years from now, or even maybe a year and a half from now, I'm going to probably say Harrison, because I think that those windows will change. Because I think that that's just the way that the dynamic of the wide receivers are. However, the one thing about Amon-Ra that I love is he works the middle of the field. He can play the slot, but he can play outside. And he has the ability to hit a home run at any given point in time as well. I don't think he relies on that, and I also think he's a very smart player because he doesn't take a ton of hits. For a guy who works the middle of the field, he doesn't really get lit up very often. He finds a way to get down to the ground. It's very Cooper Kupp-esque-ish, like in the sense of how he, like when he's around traffic and how he handles himself. So I think he's a very smart player. So I think he could prolong his career if he continues doing that. Marvin is so dynamic, and you already see it in the first 4 games, right? Like his yards per catch is insane through the first 4 games. Like you said, don't expect it to stay up there, but he can do that though, right? Like, I mean, his route tree has got to be, he's probably got one of the most complete route trees than anybody else in the NFL coming into the league, because of how often he was all over the place with OSU. And I'm sure Brent right now is salivating at the fact that we're talking about an OSU player and super happy about it. But like Marvin Harrison did that. Like, that was just what he did at OSU. It's what he's going to do in Arizona. Eventually, he's going to fall into that little more complete player. I think right now they don't need him to. I'm very curious about how defenses are going to game plan for him now, though, because it is a 3-game window. No, I don't count week 1, but it is a 3-game window now where they're seeing that he can make a huge difference. So how is he going to be game planned moving forward for? Because let's face it, as much as it was nice watching Washington beat Arizona, that friggin' secondary is awful. That secondary is friggin' terrible. So whatever he did against Washington is not a surprising. Like,
So, I mean, Washington was only 5 for 45 and a touchdown. It wasn't like it was anything
okay, so I mean, so
miraculous.
maybe Washington was the start of that whole process of game planning for him then.
Well, and I think that's gonna be obviously the strategy for him is, how do you get better to beat stuff like that, and then obviously the game plan. How do we find ways to get our guys into better situations? It's you just go in thinking, oh, it's Marvin Harrison, he's going to figure it out. You're not going to be successful. It's the NFL. Every player, for the most part, is a good to great player. Corners, whether they're you think or not, are for the most part quite good in the NFL.
Yeah.
So they're still NFL players. So as an offensive coordinator, you have to get creative. So we'll see. I agree. I think it's Amon-Ra. I think he's proven it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that Amon-Ra does and does very well is when you need the extra yards, he's got the power
Oh
to
yeah,
get them. So, and that's great for around the goal line at times when he's, sometimes you're getting tackled at the one, he's powering through most of the time and getting the touchdown. The
and
body
he's
control he
smart
has.
about it too. Like he's smart about when to do it and when not to do it, and I think that goes understated a lot with how good of a player he really is, because he's a smart player too. For as good as he is, he's extremely smart as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and we talked about, I think, after that week one, Jameson's picking up and Amon-Ra. You know, I think the Jameson thing will just open up more of that middle of the field for Amon-Ra and Gibbs. I think what we're gonna see possibly Detroit starting to move away from is all of the running. So that's where I think David Montgomery will start to kind of pull off from, just because you could use Gibbs in a pass catching but be the running, that's a running play for you kind of role in that offense. And
yeah,
that's where it's at. I mean, so again, neither player you're going wrong with. I think if you were a team in a rebuild and you were offered the same, I would take Marvin Harrison, because you're gonna, in 2 years when your team is, that's when possibly you're going to be looking to move Amon-Ra anyway, where Marvin will be possibly coming right into his prime. If I'm a
right.
contender, I want to stick with I want to get Amon-Ra. He's more ready right now, I think, to be consistent across a full season. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree
No,
there.
I agree with that. I don't have anything to add to that. I think it's just I do think that eventually with Marvin Harrison is we'll be having this discussion and treating him in the same categories as the Jamar Chases of the world and stuff like that. But I also think Kyler Murray hinders him more than Jared Goff hinders Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
You know,
Goff is,
so
I think, a better overall quarterback. Murray's more athletic. Goff's just a better passer.
and I'm so happy for Goff, by the way. It's very similar to Baker. Like I'm very happy for him. I'm glad. Like I was not a huge fan of him coming out, but I don't like seeing quarterbacks not really, have teams give up on them and not really get a chance to really showcase. And I mean, he led him to a Super Bowl and they still gave up on him. So it was like, you know,
It's
that wasn't the
been
right idea.
so interesting this year, looking across the board. Baker Mayfield's on the come up. Sam Darnold is looking very good.
Yeah,
Geno Smith is still playing well. Jared Goff is playing well. Like, all of these retread quarterbacks that are playing super well, and I think teams really need to start looking at, like,
it's the lack of
maybe it's
development.
not the best to just throw. Yeah, I know Jaden Daniels and CJ Stroud last year, Daniels so far this year. Everybody is, but it's not a guarantee with everybody. So,
Don't
like, I just
that
I don't understand why, when you're in the top of the draft, you're probably a bad team. So why just throw them out there? I think it was, I think Mayo had said, or somebody at least pointed out, that we probably won't see Drake May any earlier because of the injury
right.
to the guy you mentioned. Because you're going to throw him out there in front of a subpar offensive line and get killed for what reason? What point? You're not going to be winning games anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just that too. I think it's also you take a look at it from a standpoint of uh, what good are you doing if you're not able to develop the guy, right? Like if you have a rookie quarterback, Bryce Young in Carolina, like I hope they're actually truly like wanting to stick with him, because he's an epitome. He's a definition of exactly everything that we've seen. You know, like you can't develop these guys. I think the only guy that really failed because he just might have been a bust was Zach Wilson, because I don't think you can develop him at this point in time because another team moved on from him. But like Sam Darnold could have easily have been like you just gotta wait. You have to be patient on these guys. And a lot of times these teams don't want to be patient because they think it's an automatic turnaround, and that's not always the case. Like Jaden and CJ Stroud are the outlier, not the norm.
I
Right?
think you have to really start looking at some of these organizations and question what are you doing? Because
Sorry.
did your parlay hit? Is that what that was for?
Three legs of my parlay have hit now. So
Yeah. The Jets, the Browns are probably two of the biggest ones because you have Baker coming out of the Browns and them winning you a playoff game, which you had you hadn't made the playoffs in 30 years, let alone you won one and you gave up on them. The Jets, you threw Darnold out with teams and coaches and just terrible situations. And Gino, also the Jets. Like we're talking about three quarterbacks from two teams for the most part.
right.
And then the Panthers, you can almost throw in there on top of that because they had both Baker and Sam Darnold also, and couldn't figure it out. You Sam Darnold goes to the Niners, and is it because there was a coach there that really wanted to develop the guy to help him out? Like, I just don't get the idea of. But I also think it comes to your scouting, because Trey Lance you can put in that category with Zach Wilson. And I know injuries kind of derailed him, but he's not even being used as the backup in Dallas. So that's a little telling.
Yeah. And that's what happens sometimes. I mean, you're picking near the top of the draft, but if you're a bad team and you're picking a developmental guy, you have no choice but to be patient. You have to be patient, because as much as I want to give Trey Lance the benefit of the doubt, and
they were patient though too,
and not put. Well, were they though?
I think so.
How many career starts did he have in San Francisco?
Well, I don't know. He got injured and all that stuff, and then Purdy outplayed him. But I'm saying is,
I'm not blaming San Francisco for that part, but like
they at least didn't throw him out in year one, knowing he was developmental. They ran with Garoppolo, but again, they were also a better team overall. They traded up to get.
They traded up to go get Lance. I mean, that was
it's a different situation in that sense, but they at least didn't force him to be the guy. And honestly, Purdy outplayed him. And
Purdy absolutely.
And they stuck with him.
Yeah.
They didn't go, well, he was our number 3 pick. We're gonna have to do this. No.
Yeah.
You got outplayed, and they stuck with him. So I don't blame San Francisco for Trey Lance. And
no.
And I think Dallas re-signed Dak partly because they didn't believe in Trey Lance.
I think so.
Trey Lance had shown them anything in their practice, whatever, I think they would have possibly not done what they done.
But I think this is a very important conversation too that has been kind of bubbling to the surface a lot lately, is the developmental issues with the NFL. They have a tough time developing quarterbacks. It's a very weird dynamic, and it's a lot of rehash, recycles, and hope that you hit on a rookie eventually. But they have a quarterback developmental problem, because honestly, if you think about it, and Mark, you're the one that brought this up when we talked about Josh Allen. If Josh Allen didn't have the year that he had in year 3, Buffalo would probably be in the same boat. And everybody's like, oh, well, at least they gave him 3 years. Yes, at least they did give him 3 years. I will say that. At least they did. However, if they hadn't have given him 3 years, he would not be the same quarterback. So it's almost like they kind of luck boxed into developing him, right? Like,
well,
it was almost like
the same for McDermott. They gave him
time from a head coach.
He was probably on year 5 or 6 at that point because he was there before him. But they didn't. They weren't a good team, but they allowed him to build into the system and develop a team that worked.
Right.
No Super Bowls, they get it, but only one team wins a Super Bowl every year. And it's really hard when you start out with Tom Brady and then literally move into Patrick Mahomes. It's a tough thing to do.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And because Buffalo, you were playing with Brady in for the first years of McDermott, and then you finally got him out, and then you got to deal with Patrick Mahomes in your conference, and Joe Burrow, and it's
Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson.
The AFC is loaded with young, talented quarterbacks.
Yeah, the NFC just retreads everybody at this point.
And then Aaron Rodgers, who looked absolutely dreadful against a team that had a rookie quarterback throw for 60 yards against them and lose.
Can we talk about his helmet a little bit? What he looks old in that helmet.
He looks so old.
And
It reminds
his head
me
doesn't
of
look like it fits in that helmet.
It reminds me of Dennis Quaid from Any Given Sunday.
It reminds me. It looks like he's those big caps.
Yeah,
big
caps.
That's what it looks like he's wearing. Like he bought a helmet that's the big helmet.
Look, Coach, I'm a player too. Yeah, he looks old for sure. All right, Mark, I don't have anything else. Do you?
No.
All right. Well, for the viewers out there, thank you for sticking through that hour-long show. Really, I mean, honestly, shout out to Sam again, Shady Sports Network, for giving us a platform. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the little dingy to get the notifications. We're trying to be here every Thursday, between 8 and 8:30-ish range. If you have any questions, please, I say it every week, please put it in the comments, send a message to Dynasty Academy on X. It's at Dynasty Academy. The E in Academy is a 3. You can hit me up on X as well. It's MW77, and 77 is spelled out. Even if you're in our leagues, just mention it in the leagues. We'll hit it up and talk about it on the show by all means. We'll give you roster submissions, trade advice, unbiasedly, because we're not those kind of people. And yeah, that's about all I got, man. I don't think I have anything else. You?
No, good high scoring game here though. So
yeah, they can
keep an exciting Thursday.
They can keep doing it. They can keep doing it, because I'm almost there. So just keep doing it. Almost there on my 5-leg parlay. Almost there. Almost there. Keep doing it. Keep going. He's Mark Ongst. I'm Michael Washington, and until next week, so long.